If your organization's full of people pleasers or high achievers, or maybe that's you, then you might want to tune into this chat with Dr. Katherine Iscoe. We're talking about self-respect and how that can cut through getting rid of people pleasers and high achievers, even if that's you, so that we can let go of the imaginary judgment and criticism and make awesome things happen. It's about taking bigger risks by letting go of the self-doubt. Welcome to Reimagining HR with Trina Sunday, the rule-breaking podcast where we challenge our thinking and our current people practices. This podcast is for time-poor HR teams and business leaders who are feeling the burn, lacking laughs, and not feeling the love. I'm Trina, your host, and I'm here to cut through the BS, explore different ways of thinking, and create high-impact HR functions. Because happier, healthier organisations are better for our people and our bottom line. So if you are keen to flip traditional HR on its head, hit the follow or subscribe button so you're the first to know when new episodes drop. I'm here to help and also to shake things up. So let's get started. Welcome. I'm joined by Dr. Katherine Iscoe today. She's a female motivational speaker, a board member, a former tech CEO of a dually listed public company. She's an author, multiple scholarship winner, and an aspiring actor dreaming of playing a therapist on the big screen. So we might lean into that in a bit. But she'd probably also say that her career history and achievements kind of show up the masks that we often wear in life, right? Where the realities don't match up with the achievements. And now through her research and work, she's taking leaders from self-doubt to self-respect and challenging them to take bigger risks by letting go of imaginary judgment and criticism. Oh my gosh, imagine that. Let's get stuck in. Welcome, Dr. Katherine.
Thanks so much. I'm so excited to dive in. Even there our 5-minute chat beforehand. I was like, oh, this is going to be great.
It'd be great to start it for people that don't know you. Maybe we can start a little bit with your story and kind of what's led you to where you are now and this focus that you have on self-respect and how it's kind of shaped how you're showing up in the speaking that you do and the work that you do. It'd be great to hear kind of what's led you to where you are now.
Of course. I mean, as everybody's story, there's so many, backlog and details and so forth. But I think the best way to describe my past is, I don't know if you've ever done this where you walk into a meeting or room or you're pitching to a client and you think, why am I here? Like, I'm so unimportant compared to them. They're so experienced, I'm not experienced. They're richer, smarter, whatever the adjective is. I'm not that. I don't deserve to be there. And that's really what self-respect is. Confidence gets you in the room, whereas self-respect keeps you standing tall within that room. And I mean that, in my case, literally, but also figuratively, because I think confidence is extremely important. And the way I describe confidence is to give something a go. It's such a great Australian saying, to give it a go, mate.
Yep.
Which is great, to trust yourself to give something a go. It gets you in the room. But what happens when you're in that room, if you say the wrong thing or someone looks at you not in the way you want, all of a sudden you're triggered and you lose yourself. You start becoming someone you're not. And that's really the summary of probably the 47 years of my life. For a majority of that, I was someone I wasn't because I thought people were more important than me or people were more special than me. And I think we've all had that experience where you especially wake up, 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 20s, where you just look in the mirror, you're like, what the hell am I doing with my life? And that's really why I'm so interested in self-respect, because self-respect is that feeling like there's something special about me worth protecting. And I think that is incredibly important, not only for everyone to hear, but especially women.
It's really interesting because I think, and as you know, like I work with a lot of HR leaders and organizations, but I work with the people, right, to try and look at how we can transform our people practices, transform organizations, show up better, more respectfully, inclusive environments. But the respect starts with self, right? And I think, there's a critical role in leadership, which I feel is really timely and it resonates with me around what HR professionals are facing. Because the reality is the HR leaders that I'm coaching, I don't feel like they have high self-respect. And I have lots of tools and, psychometric stuff that helps me back that in from a scientific perspective. But you just feel it, like the self-doubt, the self-deprecating language, it's something that's really interesting to me to kind of lean into, which is why I was so keen to chat because you said that, like, you can walk into rooms and have that feeling. Where did you experience that the most, I guess, in the roles that you've had before coming into this work that you do for yourself? Like, what did it look like in those organizations? Like, was it every day or was it on occasion? We talk a bit about imposter syndrome. What is it in the career backstory, I guess, and that back catalogue? Was there a specific space where it was more prevalent than others?
I think it started when I was young. And this is not to point fingers by any means, but I think many of us grew up with you don't get to go first, let someone else go first. Wait your turn and then finally you'll make it. Like don't worry about what you think of yourself, worry about what people think of you. And again, this is not to point fingers. I was born in a generation where kids are seen and not heard. So I think a lot of us have experienced that. So I think that backstory is so incredibly important when it comes to our roles today. And I wish more organizations really would take some time to understand a person's backstory because you can do all the training in the world, which is incredibly important confidence training, self care, all incredibly important. But without that foundation and specifically not letting go of the past, but just understanding it and understanding that you were a different person that back then you didn't have the knowledge that you have now. And I think that's, to answer your question, walking into those rooms, if I would have just understood my past and I could understand my present and why I react the way I do in certain situations, whereas other situations not. And I think my goal in life is to be the person my dogs know I am in every situation.
Talk me through that. How would your dogs describe you if I was the Dr. Dolittle of
Weird, quirky, like the kind of girl that laughs uncontrollably at a fart. I just think that they're the most funny things in the world. The kind of person that loves to go deep into a conversation with an Uber driver within the first 5 minutes. Just being silly almost.
Yeah.
And I think that also comes from and I'm sure we'll get into this, getting into academia and having that validation. Ooh, you have a scholarship. Ooh, you graduated summa cum laude and getting that validation. And then after graduating after 3,000 years in school, oh, you're a PhD, talk like a PhD. Oh, you can't swear on stage. Oh, goodness. And I remember I was working with someone, they even said, you have to have two closets. You have to have your Dr. Katherine closet and then you can have your other closet for how you really wanna dress. And that, I think, is like the summary of what we're talking about, like, be the person that your dogs know you are. But it's really, really difficult because, we talk about authenticity as almost like a noun, not a verb, meaning that, "Oh, yeah, yeah, just be yourself." Oh, but not like that,
Yeah.
So I think that's so incredibly important, and especially when we're talking about creativity and innovation. How is someone gonna think outside the box if they're told you can't live outside the box? "Oh, that's inappropriate."
So powerful because I think I have these conversations all the time around we want everybody to be authentic and turn up as their true selves. And like on some level, you don't want to see the all of Trina in a workplace. You're not ready for that. Like you're not ready for it. But I think it's really interesting because the insight and the owning ourself part, I see so strongly for women, entrepreneurial women especially, and women that are in business for themselves. And I even had this conversation this morning at a breakfast where it was like to be unapologetic about it. So I was asked about podcasting. And I was like, well, I don't mean for it. And it's not in the small print, but it's like half my episodes have like an explicit warning on them because I just show up as myself. And I was asked this morning, well, how does that fit given that you consult to corporates? And I was thought, do they know I'm speaking to Dr. Catherine later today? I was like, but it's like be yourself, but on my terms. And it's like the irony of it is not lost on me that it's like you don't get to decide what version of self I am. Like it's
Yeah.
self, like it's me, right?
Yeah. And I think it's finding that balance because I think we have to understand that if we wanna connect with others, they might not be at the same place that we are. And so to be respectful, I think there's a difference between being so authentic, but it's not the right time within that relationship. So, I mean, if I'm, you know, pitching to a massive corporate and I'm meeting them for the first time, you know,
I'm not dropping F bombs in that meeting.
yeah,
No.
exactly. I think it's like bricklaying. I think bricklaying is a good example. Like to build a house, you have to go brick by brick. I put a brick down, you put a brick down. We trust each other just a little bit more. Then I put a brick down, you put a brick down. So it's that almost ping pong back and forth. And sometimes you just say, you're not my vibe. We're not vibing. And I think that's like the perfect word for it. And that's when you know, okay, you know what? I think I'll just hold myself back, not because I feel like I have to, but I want to because I don't want to disrespect this sort of energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
You could be the juiciest peach in the world, and some people just don't like peaches.
that's it. Be juicy, though. Be you.
Yes.
But I think there's an element around that where I feel like there's a safety and a self-protection in that, right? Like that is not always safe to be your true, authentic self, depending on the environment and what that looks like. I mean that on really nuanced levels too. Like I think safety can just be if I'm that brash, then I'm going to lose my job or I'm not going to have that promotion. Not necessarily on the spectrum of if I'm my true self, then I'm going to get harassed or bullied or, there's a spectrum with that. I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit about the difference as well between self-esteem, self-respect, confidence, because we throw labels at lots of things. I'm keen to know kind of it's foundational for good leadership, right? And for us being great at stuff. How do you talk about it? What language do you use?
Let's use a house analogy. And I know I sound very Canadian when I say that, but a house. So self-esteem is whether you like your house. And obviously I'm using the metaphor, the analogy that we are the house. So self-esteem is, do we like our house? Now, this is really challenging because, like, let's say you're trying to sell the house and you're inside and you overhear someone saying, oh my God, I love this house. All of a sudden you're like, oh, yes, I really like my house too. But if you overhear them saying, oh my God, what were they thinking with that paint color? Obviously, you're not going to like yourself as much. So self esteem is quite variable in that sense. Self worth is also variable. Similar to the change in markets, you're going to value yourself differently in different environments. So if you've been in an organization for 5, 10, 30 years, you're going to feel really comfortable because you know how your talent, skills, and the way you do things are of value to that organization. You feel comfortable in that environment. Whereas if you're just on the first day, you're going to feel a bit wonky, right? And you're not going to understand your worth in that environment yet. When it comes to confidence, confidence is your ability to sell your house, to say, yeah, I trust that, I'm pretty good. I'm going to be able to trust myself to sell it. But you have that recipe of self-esteem and self-worth that sort of gets put into that pot. Now, where self-respect fits in is that's the foundation of your house. So everything, you could have tornadoes, earthquakes, everything in the world, COVID. I can't even imagine how HR professionals got through that. I mean, what a shitstorm that was for them. That's when your house gets absolutely knocked down. Self-respect is still there. Self-respect is that ability to tell yourself every single thing in my life is going wrong, but that doesn't mean that I'm wrong. I can still rebuild myself. It's almost like an insurance safety net. It's that ability, getting back to the analogy of walking into that room and all the important people are there and you're pitching this big deal. Your ability to walk out of that room and say, "Oh my gosh, I said the wrong thing. I did the wrong thing. I totally screwed that up." But that doesn't mean that what I have and who I am is not important. Just because I didn't show my best self doesn't mean it's almost, I guess the analogy is just because I make a mistake doesn't mean I am a mistake.
It's mistakes not defining you, right?
Yeah, but we let it. Don't we let it?
Why do we let it?
I think, again, I'm of the mindset that I think we underestimate the power of our past. And I say power in both sense of the word, positive and negative. If you were raised where your parents are like, just go for it, don't fall, scrape your knee, do whatever, don't worry about what people think of you, you're going to have that supportive mindset growing up. You're going to be like, yeah, sure, I'll jump off the cliff. My parachute's going to be fine. Whereas if you don't, if you have maybe that high achieving environment where you got to get the A plus, you got to get this, you got to get that, it's going to be very, very difficult to look at the world in a different way if that's how you were brought up for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And I think we have to understand that to be able to get out of that. I think that's a challenge here. We just think, oh, the past is the past. Let's just look into the future. It's so incredibly valuable. And at the core of it, what you need to do, you have to forgive the person who made you the way you are. And that's really at the core of everything that we're talking about. This is like after the bottle of wine.
There's a lot of therapy in that, right? Like there's a lot of support. And I don't say that flippantly either, in case anyone misinterprets me on that, because there are tools to this stuff. You don't just wake up one day saying, I really need to examine my belief systems and I really need to lean into this and understand who is Trina at her core? Like, who am I? Like, no one wakes up with that clarity. There'll be an incident, there'll be an event, there'll be a realization of behaviors that aren't serving us, not healthily anyway. And there's tools to look at that. And I don't feel like in organizations we do that or support that process particularly well. And it's really interesting. I've done so much more self-examination work as a businesswoman because I am my business. And if I don't figure out how I roll and how I can leverage my strengths or where I've got gaps that I need to complement with someone else with superpowers in that space, then I'm not going to be successful, right? So I've leaned into it far more earnestly, but it's because I didn't have a fear space though of the judgment that we talked about in the beginning or the criticism. Like I wasn't exposed in that way because it was just me, Trina Sunday, trying to figure out how I roll. But the house analogy is really interesting because I think about when you talk about the market share, couldn't help it. I've got Trumpisms in my head all the time. I can't get him out. I'm so glad you mentioned you're Canadian so no one misunderstands. But it's an external thing, isn't it? The external, internal. So like you talk about self-respect being that foundation. It's the space that comes from within. And so you can rebuild because you're not relying on anyone else. When I hear you talk about being subject to the market and those changes, that's the external validations. It's the external kind of acknowledgements and all criticisms goes both ways. I'm interested, do you see it that as well in terms of internal and external?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when people say, especially on socials and so forth, if I do a post and two people like it, that's going to affect me. I mean, I'm not Mother Teresa. I can't just go through life and not need any external validation at all. I mean, whoever says that, show me a liar. Show me that person, show me a liar. It's a balance between the two. It's saying, I hope people like me, but I'm going to find a way to be okay if they don't. And that's I think key when we extrapolate that to our careers. I'm going to go for this job or I'm going to have this conversation. I really hope it goes well. I'm going to be disappointed if it doesn't. But you know what? Disappointment fades, regret stays. And the reason why I say that is go for it. Because if you don't go for it, you're going to have that thing in your mind. Oh, I should have gone for that job. I should have had that conversation with someone. And that's what's going to keep you up at 3 a.m. And then we talk about burnout. Well, no wonder we're having conversations with ourselves for 3 hours from 3 a.m. because we didn't say we coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? So I think it's a balance between the two. It feels good if you get a job. It feels good if you have that conversation with someone and it goes the way that you want. But be prepared when it doesn't. And that's where self-respect reminds you, you know what? There's something special about me worth protecting. Meaning, I still have that value in me. The way I look at the world and the way I see things and the way I present myself, it's unique. It's like, as Oprah said, something along the lines of, you have a special gift that only you can give the world. But we don't think our gift is that special because we say, when it comes to HR, oh, everyone can do my job. It's not that special the way I do my job in HR because everyone's an HR person. Everyone can do my job. No, because the way you do your job, if you get to the core of it, that special way that you connect with people, only you can do that. I really wish people would see that more. That quirky, weird way of doing what they do.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't the world be such an interesting place?
Oh, so interesting. And we'd have innovation in spades in our organizations because that's where the magic happens. And it's interesting that I was just triggered by the everyone can do your job in HR because we do. We have this element around, especially with leaders that we work with where it will be, I'm a human. So, of course, I'm an expert in human resources. And there's a whole specialism in there. And it's a whole different conversation around HR and what we need to do for our brand. But part of it is at the core of this and with the conversation with you, the high achiever versus the people pleaser. And then you've got self-respect coming through and going, yeah, good job, guys, but back off. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here. This is where it's at. I see this play out in a HR context all the time. And we have, and in humans all the time. Like, HR is not absent of being affected by the cultures of our organizations or just being humans generally. But people pleaser and high achiever, talk me through what that looks like. And I find the reels that you've done where you are acting out these personalities and what scenarios look like if you're playing the role of the high achiever, playing the role of, the people pleaser, and then self-respect comes through and cuts through the bullshit basically. And I just love it. It's so engaging. If people haven't caught it, there'll be links in the show notes. But talk me through those roles and what you see from your perspective.
Yeah. So the high achiever is that person in your mind that says, you know what? We want to succeed. We want to do that amazing thing. Not that I've ever done HR, so I don't want to, jump to a conclusion here, but I'm just guessing. I think it's my aunt was in HR and she's been retired for maybe 30 years. And I think she's just now getting over that job.
She's a recovering HR professional.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
the
hardcore.
stories that she's told me. So you want to make the organization a better place. You want to get ahead in your job. You want to go up that ladder. So the high achiever is there, but it's never enough. Even if you get a promotion or even if you have a great conversation with someone, there's another conversation you need to have. So it's never enough. You're running a race against yourself, but there's no finish line because you just keep on pushing that finish line. Now, the people pleaser comes in and says, well, you have to be nice to everyone because if you're not nice to everyone, then, well, why are you in HR? So you have to be everyone's best friend. And where does that get you? Nowhere fast, right? It's very, very hard to be successful in your job and in your career if your priority is being everyone's best friend. Is this hard, especially I think and I'm making a generalization here, but the HR people that I've met are really, really nice people.
Who are those people?
Yeah. High levels of compassion, high levels of empathy because they're trying to they put themselves in other people's shoes, a lot. And that's really, really difficult because you feel things. You want to be their best friend in some ways. So this high achieving people pleasing conflict is almost like having siblings in your head, when like if you have twins and they both want the same thing, they both want the same toy, but they want to achieve it in different ways. So the high achiever, it's never enough. And the people pleaser holds you back because it says, don't worry about that. Let's worry about what people think of us. And so there's a push pull between the two. And self respect comes in and says, okay, you've achieved that. Yes, celebrate it. But yeah, go for that next thing. And the reason why I say that is, sometimes we think of self respect as self compassion. But the reason why I like self respect is it actually really supports high achievers. It says, yeah, you're achieving because you do challenge yourself. But there's a big difference between, I guess, punishing yourself versus challenging yourself. And self respect with the people pleaser says, yeah, be nice to people, but remember to protect yourself first. Don't allow that shield to come down and allow, I guess, when you try to please everyone, you please no one. That's sort of what it comes down to. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's some real kind of synergy with some of the work I do in culture change as well. And if anyone in HR communities use human synergistics tools, but when you talk about some of the self-respect elements, it's really there's strong parallels with that self-actualizing part of us where, is coming from meeting our satisfaction needs. It comes from knowing who we are, what we value, how we show up. And so you can deflect, right? What others view your achievements or friendships, being everyone's bestie. But it does hold you back, that tension, because it's like you can't have a difficult conversation if you're trying to be everyone's mate. And you can't be looking at things holistically if you are so high achieving that you're not looking at what the landscape has in front of you to know at what cost. And that's where it becomes, not a constructive kind of strive. Like smash those stretch goals, like go for the stars, but watch the collateral damage that you might leave in your wake. But I think about HR leaders that I work with, and I think, and this is where it can blur and you can oversimplify it, where it's kind of, they put themselves last. And so the self respect is really, in some of the work that I'm finding in the coaching that I do, it's just not there. Like the sense of self isn't there. And so I do a lot of work with my clients around, finding your identity, finding that uniqueness, the quirk, how you own it. I call it superpowers. So I talk about knowing what your superpowers are, like that, you have that other people don't have, and it becomes part of your personal brand, really. What your unique selling proposition is your quirks. It's the things that make you you that other people can't replicate. But it's knowing how to use it then. And I see a bigger gap in this with HR clients that I work with than other leaders. So what I see, and maybe it's also because the HR profession's dominated by women. So I have no science to back this up. This is a world according to Trina. But, we've got HR leaders dominated by women. I'm going to say 70% in terms of, clearly making that up. But it's definitely a majority. And so there's layers of the gender belief system, and, there's a whole patriarchy and there's a whole thing in there. It's a chat for another day. But I'm seeing HR leaders coming with less self-respect than other leaders in the leadership development work that I do. And hence why I reached out to have a chat, because I think you talk about the self-respect revolution, and I'm keen to hear more about that, because I feel like there is something in this where HR teams that are striving for that authenticity, and I talk about high impact, you can't do it without self-respect. And so then the next question people have is, well, where do I start? So where do we start?
A great way, I guess, I think the thing that we have to concentrate on is our fear of coming across as narcissists. The irony of that is that if you were a narcissist, one, you wouldn't be worried about if you're a narcissist. People pleasers have this irrational fear of coming across as arrogant, as selfish, as self-serving, when we're not. We're not. Because likely if you're a people pleaser, just focusing on that, is this has been years. Years of being the good girl, years of being the selfless one. So over time, if you picture a spectrum, on the right, on the very, very top right is a people pleaser. On the very bottom, like the left is a narcissist. And then the center, it's your average person. Some days, they're a little bit nice. Sometimes they're a little bit selfish, but on average, they're average. So over the years, if you picture on that spectrum, you're sort of sidestepping to the right. You're becoming more and more of a people pleaser. Meaning, when you think you're being selfish, you don't think you're just normal. You think you're going to be a narcissist. You jump all the way down. I'll give you an example of this. So a normal person, if they go out to a restaurant, they order a steak, they go to Rock Pool, it's like $3,000 for 1 ounce of meat, and it's overcooked, right? A normal person would say, listen, looks really delicious. However, I ordered a rare and it's like nuclear, right? Or something like that. Would you be able to do another one? Please and thank you. Fine, kosher, bada bing, bada boom. A people pleaser will go into their head and say, if I send this back, the chef is going to hate me. He's going to talk, or she or he is going to talk to the rest of their team. They're all going to come into the kitchen and look at me. They're going to remember my face. They're going to say, she's a psychopath. she's the worst person in the world. Then they're going to take that same steak, spit on it, and send it back out. I swear to God, this is what goes through our mind, sending a steak back. This is the difficulty that we face. We think when we're being a little bit proud of ourselves, a little bit selfish, we go into our mind and catastrophize into the future that we will be put on Channel 9 News as welcome to the world's worst person in the entire world. And I swear there's going to be at least one person listening to this saying, "Did you read my diary?" So, when it comes to what we need to focus on, especially as high achieving people pleasers, is to start realizing that when we're a little bit selfish, when we put ourselves first now and again, we are not narcissists. This is actually a step towards just being average, normal, healthy, self respecting human beings. And we start to look at that in our daily practices. When someone says, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" your automatic reaction is whatever you want. Start there. Start saying, "You know what? We've had chicken for the past 18 years. I want fish. What do you want to watch for TV tonight? I want to watch the Kardashians, but I hate the Kardashians. Who cares? We've watched killing movies for the past 60 years. I'm watching the Kardashians." I'm being a bit, obviously tongue in cheek here. But when we start looking at those practices each and every day, especially when we jump into the corporate, when someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, can you help me with this thing?" And all of a sudden you look at your schedule and you have a full deck. You are so behind on your work. This is your chance to say, "Listen, I would love to help you with that, but I'm really behind on my work. Would you be able to ask someone else?" It's those little moments in your day where you can just start tweaking, sidestepping back to that normalcy. I'm getting on my soapbox here that I'm very ferocious about this topic because it's those small things. It's those
Yeah.
small things that are so freaking normal, but we're so scared of them.
But it's the habit stacking, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
And so it's kind of, you have to focus on those small things to retrain your brain to be conscious of it because it's automatic response. Like, and it goes back to childhood, as you say, and it goes back to, and I'm not a psychologist, not pretending to be, but we know that we build those automated responses and habits really early and then they get kind of cemented over time, right? In the different environments we move through from education into work life or whatever. But it's being conscious in the moment, conscious enough to not automatically go, "Sure, can help you with that thing." And it's like, I don't have the cognitive load space to tell you what we should have for dinner because I literally can't think of how I'm putting my foot in front of the other at this moment in time. Like, and so
Yeah.
we default to things thinking it's easier sometimes too, but it actually makes it harder for us, right?
hmm And we stay quiet a lot, right? We suppress our discomfort to keep the comfort of others. But the thing is, if you don't speak up, your silence is going to talk for you.
Yeah.
Your silence says way more about you than any misstep or any silly thing that you say. Silence says so much. If you don't mind, I'll tell you a really, really quick story about this.
Yeah.
My great grandmother, this is back in 1938, she was Jewish. This was in communist Czechoslovakia. I'll tell this, very long story in a truncated form. She knew that there was these raids, the equivalent of the Nazis. They were called the Hlinka Guard, which was a paramilitary organization, but sort of think of them as the Nazis. She knew that they were doing these raids. She was a very wealthy woman, Jewish, lived in this penthouse. And so two armed guards showed up at her doorstep one afternoon. Her daughter was there. So in Jewish faith, it goes through the mother. So her kids were both Jewish. And she had to make a decision there because they said, "Come with us, drop everything. You're going to come with us." Her daughter fainted. So, for the moms listening to this, imagine you're at the door, you have rifles pointed towards you, and your daughter has fainted. She had to make a choice. Does she stay silent or does she speak up? Hard decision, right? Now, she's my size. She's 5 foot on her very best day. She's no longer with us, but she was the scariest woman I've ever met, by the way. She had to make a decision. She took those two men with rifles over to her balcony and said this: You can either push us off or shoot us right here. We're not going with you. They left.
My gosh.
Oh, yeah, she was really friggin' scary. Let me get you like, but the point, this is a very, very extreme example. I'm cognizant of that, right? But I think it's a really good lesson for every single day of our lives. Every single day, we have a chance to speak up and say something. But as high achieving people pleasers, we don't. It's not the right time. The other person is stressed. They have more work than I do, or enter excuse here. Every single day, we have the choice to speak up and we don't because it's easier. And this is where I think self respect comes in. And obviously, I'm biased here. I think we go through life thinking that the key to life is happiness. What a bullshit statement that is. I mean, because let me tell you, in that situation,
Unattainable, right?
yeah, when you don't speak up, you keep the peace. Everyone's happy, right? Everyone's, oh, yes, that's the key to life. Let's just go through life and be happy. But just because you're happy doesn't mean that you're proud of who you are as a person. When you go home and you're going to coulda, shoulda, woulda, said that, are you proud of yourself? You are not, right? So I think rather than thinking about what can I do to keep the peace, to keep everyone happy in my life, start asking the question, when I get home at night, am I going to be proud of the person that I am and the decisions that I made that day? And if you say no to that, you got to look hard in the mirror because let me tell you, this life goes by in an instant. And there's a great book called The Five Regrets of the Dying. The top regret was I wished I lived a life true to me, not the life others expected of me. That was a top regret of both men and women. And this is why I have a tattoo on my arm, to thine own self be true. This is a tattoo that it's a quote from Shakespeare. It says, love dad, because my dad told me this quote ever since I was knee high to a grasshopper. And parents give you advice. You're like, you're weird. I don't understand you. This only made sense to me about 2, 3 years ago. And this is a reflection of every single moment. It's those hard things that we need to do that it's going to take away our happiness. But at least we can put our head down on the pillow and say, you know what? I'm proud of that decision, even though it was really friggin' hard. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, stay there. I like it. I think there's so much in that when I reflect on the story. There's so much power in you can't think or act boldly, in my opinion, world according to Trina, if you don't know who you are. It's very hard to step out and buck the system would be the Australian term for it, or to challenge the status quo if you're corporating up this thing. But to boldly go, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. That's not cool because of X, Y, Z. And then you take it to a constructive place of, but I see what you're trying to achieve. And I think maybe we could do it a different way. Like, can we explore, this? But I feel like we have this gap in terms of this sense of self that means that we can't step into the world boldly. And I feel like we blame then systems and organizations sometimes. This will be controversial for some of my HR crowd, I think. We blame the systems and the cultures of our organizations for not empowering our workforces. But I think there's also an element of resistance to taking up the power. I think that there are people that have the limiting beliefs, that have the lack of self-respect to go, yeah, I'm going to take that. I'm going to run with it. And I don't know the answer for it yet. Might marinate on that after our chat as well. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. But I think there's something in that where you can try and empower, but people have got to step into that for themselves, right?
I think a lot of people feel like they don't have a choice. Can't remember who I was chatting with, and they emailed me, oh, but I don't have a choice. This is what I have to do. I said, I understand that mindset, but you actually do have a choice. The problem is the choice that is good for you often goes against your morals, your values.
It's an example.
Yeah. So I was at this talk, I can't remember, at one of the big oil and gas, massive, there's probably 300 people in the audience. The CFO of this huge organization was talking, and someone from the organization raised a hand and just said, listen, I'm in this really, really toxic team. What should I do? She gave some suggestions. Have you considered this and that? He came back, tried all those things. They went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And at the end, she said, listen, at the end of the day, you have 2 feet, you can walk. That's a choice. We don't do that because it's hard, because we have mortgages. We have kids, that we need to feed. We have school fees. But I think the most important to recognize is you do have that choice. And I think just knowing that, I think sometimes we forget that we have that choice. It's a really, really hard choice because we don't want to be selfish. And this is when, again, that concept of, being the selfish, arrogant narcissist. Oh, I'm going to quit my job. Who cares about whether my kids can go to school or not? That's scary. But sometimes we have to balance of, am I happy, or do I think I'm happy in this job? But am I proud of being in this job? And I think that's the push pull there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think proud's the interesting lens there. It's probably not a word that I've gravitated to in pondering this. And that's why I talk to people that are not me, right? So that you can kind of look at the language that you use. But I think there's a lot of fear in that, right? There's fear based decisions in that, the same as we have fear based leadership, which is what's setting the tone for this in organizations as well, because our leaders are also not bold or self respecting or finding the power from within to stand their ground for things they believe in.
Yeah.
But I think neither of us are sitting here flippantly saying, just quit your job. Like, neither of us are saying that. And you've acknowledged kind of the adulting that goes with, decisions like that, kids' school fees, mortgages, which are through the roof, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think there is always a choice. And to your point, I think it's around how it feels though if you feel like you're trapped.
It feels like shit.
If you feel like you're trapped, everything feels absolutely like it feels shit, right? Because there's no hope. Like when you feel trapped, there's no hope. Or if you feel like you've got a way of saying, well, what are the options that I have here? And walking is always an option.
Mhm.
And I talk to my clients around and a lot of HR leaders, because a lot of them are in career transition. A lot of people will come and work with me. They're either trying to level up, they're game changers wanting to innovate in the HR space, reimagine how they do it, or they're at a career crossroads, or they're like, I'm burnt out, I'm imploding, COVID's absolutely caned me. There's been no relenting since either, by the way, because we leaned everyone up and didn't rebuild teams but expect 3 times the work. So it's looking at, well, what are the options here? And do you stay in toxicity? I wouldn't continue to smother my body with chemicals once I found out they're going to give me cancer, not knowingly. Know better, do better. So once you know you're in a space that's toxic or it's not serving you, that's got to be where the self-respect comes in to say, I'm worth more than this. And self-worth isn't the term you use, but like, I'm worth more than this. I value myself more than this. So I have to go somewhere. Something has to change.
There's something special about me worth protecting.
Yeah. What are some practical things that could be introduced or considered to kind of help shift the dial on self-respect in our organizations? Do you have any thoughts?
I don't want to jump in and say, I know that world. I think that would be an insult to them. But what I do know is people. I know mindset. And I think the first thing to recognize is sometimes we try to, what's the saying? I think it's an Australian saying, putting lipstick on a pig or something like
Yeah, I
that.
don't know where that comes from, but we need to unpack that in some therapy, I think,
Yeah.
because that's just, yeah.
But it's kind of like that. Like sometimes you think, I have a job, so I should be grateful. I have, roof over my head. I should be grateful. But sometimes, what? Gratitude is great, but sometimes it can be a bit toxic, if I'm allowed to say that. Sometimes it's okay for you to say, you know what? I really don't like my job right now. I really don't like my life right now. And letting that out is, my partner hates when I use this analogy, by the way, but I'm going to say it anyways. It's like a fart, right? Sometimes you just got to fart. But because we're high achieving people pleasers, we don't fart. We don't do anything like that. Sometimes you just got to let out that fart and be friggin' normal and say, you know what? Everything is shit right now. I don't like it. Sometimes you need a little help, but I think, especially as high achievers, we say, oh no, we should know how to do our job. And as people pleasers, oh, everyone has it so much worse than us. So why would we bother them with our problems? They're not as big of a deal. But sometimes you just need a little helping hand to see the world in a different way, because you can't see the picture of your life when you're inside that frame. Meaning, sometimes when we're in that stressful shit vortex when nothing is going right, you can't see the forest through the leaves or whatever that saying is, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a little helping hand. I'll just tell you a quick story. When I was in Washington, D.C. for my first ever scientific conference, I thought I'd walk to the convention center, right? Like, yeah, beautiful day. Got my coffee, got my blueberry bagel, walk in, my Gucci sunglasses.
Heels?
No, no heels. I was wearing like Adidas because it was a bit of a walk.
Just checking.
Yeah, no, that would sound like me. It was like 4 kilometers, let's say. So I'm walking. I'm like, I think I should be at the convention center by now. I'm like, nah, no, it's fine. I'll just keep on walking. Walking. Like, so weird. Like, the houses don't look as nice anymore. Walking. Oh, the lawns have like garbage in them, and all the windows have bars on them, and not the pretty kind, the scary kind. I'm like, shit. Oh shit. And this is back in the day, I had my BlackBerry, but I was in the States. I wasn't in Canada, so my phone didn't work, this and that. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't, right? But also my pride. It's a lot of pride. It's a lot of, oh, no. I know where I'm going. Everything's fine. I can do this myself, right? I'm a big girl. So I get to the stretch where there's like a big fence on one side and then just scariness on the other side. So I kept on walking. Got to this intersection. This is a truncated story. 2 cop cars were sitting on the opposite side. Cops look at me, I look at them, they point, and they say, come here. So I walk over and I was like, ditzy, like, hi, so I'm just a little bit lost. And they're like, yeah, think? And I was like, can you just tell me what bus to take or something like that? They're like, get in the car. I was like, that's fine. Again, I can do it myself. I don't need your help. I'm a big girl, right? Pushback, ego. I was so mortified with this. So he said, get in. I tried to get in the back seat. He's like, no, get in the front seat. So the other cop car pulls away and we're driving. He said, you realize the only reason why you're alive right now is because the murderers are still asleep and the drug dealers are at church with their mums. I was in the worst area of the northeastern seaboard ever. And the only reason why I was still alive was it was a Sunday morning. So he drops me off at the red carpet of this conference and this and that. I said, thank you so much. Like, I'm so embarrassed. He says, you know what? There's a couple ways to get through life. You can either pretend that you can do it all yourself, or sometimes you just need a helping hand to get where you want to go faster. That's a very good metaphor for life. Sometimes, whether we're in HR or if we're a new parent with a newborn that hasn't slept for the past month, sometimes you got to put your ego aside and say, you know what? I need a helping hand here. Things are shit. I don't know where I'm going. I'm lost. I'm helpless. I'm not perfect. I just need a hand. Please, someone help me. That's human. That's human. And I think that's the way we put the human back in HR. Oh, that was good.
That's incredible. And that is exactly what reimagining HR looks like. Thank you so much, Dr. Katherine. I really appreciate your time. This has been an amazing chat.
Thank you so much.
Before you go, Dr. Katherine poses a really important question if you want to reflect on some things that we've talked about today. How does it feel to be you right now? And I think part of that, if you reflect on that, is we've talked a bit about self-respect today being more than confidence. It's the missing ingredient. And I talk about clarity and confidence and capability, but clarity and confidence being key. But that's self-respect, your self-value, worth, who you are, knowing your uniqueness and being able to go out boldly into the world. That's how you're going to maximize your impact, whether it's as a HR person, a leader, or however you're showing up in the world. And so have a reflect on that. How does it feel to be you right now? And what is it that you value and what's important to you and what makes you so freaking awesome that you need to protect it no matter the environment that you're in? Thanks for tuning in and leaning in to this week's episode as we look to reimagine how we show up for our people, organisations and community. Reach out to us via our website at reimaginehr.com.au with your HR horror stories or suggestions of people you'd love to hear from, or topics you want to explore. It's all about people, purpose, and impact, and we are here for all of it. Until next time, take care, team.